other correspondent, Kristie Lu Stout, while we continue to show you this vision. This is what is happening in a train station in Hong Kong now, where riot police have been facing off against protesters for hours. If you can hear me, Kristie, just give us a sense of what you have been witnessing on the streets there in Hong Kong as protesters continue to rally at this unauthorized rally as riot police try to disperse the crowd.
Right, Linda, I'm standing outside the train station where we were listening to Anna Corin and seeing the scenes of mayhem as she described it earlier. This is the final standoff in what has been another dramatic day of protest in Hong Kong. All this taking place in the far north of Hong Kong in Yuen Long. And in the vision, you could see the area here. We are outside the train station, completely surrounded by riot police in tactical gear, who throughout the last 2 hours have been using tear gas, baton charge, pepper spray to push back the protesters and to clear the streets. This has been an unauthorized protest. It began earlier today at a playground in Yuen Long at 3 p.m. and we've been there following the protest as it attracted, on our count, tens of thousands of people. We also learned from the hospital authority that at least 9 people have been hospitalized. The nature of their injuries, their ailments, not known. It was a peaceful protest attracting vast members across the demographic society here in Hong Kong. Many people brought up because they're angry about the scenes of violence that played out here in Yuen Long last weekend when we saw the men wearing white T-shirts attacking protesters, journalists and passers-by, and what people saw as a reluctant response by the police to get involved. They were directing their anger, these protesters who took out in this unlawful protest, risking arrest by taking part, directing their anger against the triads who became involved in this protest, and also against the police response. And that's the important thing to talk about here, that ever since the beginning of the summer protests here in Hong Kong, we have seen the focus change from what was originally on June the 9th, a single issue, peaceful mass protest about a controversial extradition bill, has morphed into something so much greater. It has reflected people's feelings, their anger towards the political institutions in Hong Kong, their lack of trust in the police force here in Hong Kong, their concerns that criminal gangs and triads are becoming involved in the protests that are taking place. And these are highly disruptive, massive protests that have destabilized this international financial city all across Hong Kong. Again, this is Yuen Long, the far north of Hong Kong. It's closer to mainland China than to the central business district. We're expecting more protests to take place tomorrow in Central. This is a summer protest that's not going to end anytime soon. Linda.
So, Kristie, today's protest now in its 7th hour, and as you said, more protests expected tomorrow. The government must really be regretting how it handled those first protests weeks ago.
The government is standing firm. Earlier this week, I attended a press conference that was led by the embattled chief executive, Carrie Lam. Next to her, the police commissioner, Stephen Lo. They condemned the acts of violence that took place last weekend, but they also defended police action, said that there was no link between police and triads. And according to Stephen Lo, he said the reason behind the delayed police response last weekend was because the police were concentrated in Hong Kong Island, so they weren't able to come out to Yuen Long in time. You should have heard the local press corps response to that when they heard it. They didn't buy it. And the protesters who were out in force earlier today, they didn't buy it either. That's what drove them out into the streets. Again, there was no official organizer. This was an unlawful protest. It did not gain permission by the police to take place. So there's no official count of how many people took part. But tens of thousands of people took over the streets of Yuen Long. The police, in the last 3 hours, they've engaged in this clearance operation, again, using pepper spray, rubber bullets, tear gas, pushing the protesters back. And now we have the last remaining protesters who are holed up inside the train station. That's where my colleague Anna Corin and her team have been reporting. And as we heard moments ago, police have been using pepper spray to try to control and push back those protesters as well. Very dramatic scenes here, Linda.
Absolutely. Kristie Lu Stout, good to have you on the case. I want to go back to Anna Corin.